Hey everyone, welcome to the video. This one we're going over my core plays for week 8 of the NFL season on Draftkings. Before we continue though, if you leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out and I really appreciate it. You can also follow me on Twitter at ChrisPinell16. And if you're interested in the spreadsheets I build every single week and my Slack chat, links in the description below for my Patreon. I think that's enough plugging. I say we get right into it because there's a lot of plays on this slate. I'm looking forward to it. There's a lot of good spots. So we're going to start at the quarterback position as always. And we got Russell Wilson at 7,200 versus Atlanta. He is the most expensive quarterback on the slate. I don't typically love spending it for quarterbacks, but there's a lot of value on this slate, so we can do it if we want to. Just pretty much typical quarterbacks versus Atlanta matchup. It's kind of like tight ends versus Arizona. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if we can do a tight end versus Arizona this week because of Jared Cook's health, so we'll see. But pretty much, we love quarterbacks versus Atlanta. It's the highest Vegas total on the slate at 53.5 over under. The Seahawks have a 29.5 team total, which is near highest on the slate. I believe they're only behind the Los Angeles Rams. Atlanta is 31st DVOA versus the pass. They are horrendous versus the pass this season. They're allowing 26.2 points per game to quarterbacks, which is most in the league. And we saw Jared Goff. He had a huge bounce back game versus Atlanta after he had like a 2-point outing. So, Atlanta just plain sucks versus quarterbacks. Anyone can succeed versus them. Even Marcus Mariota. And Marcus Mariota doesn't even start anymore. That's just how bad they are versus quarterbacks this season. They're allowing 275 yards through the air and nearly 2.5 touchdowns per game to quarterbacks. They're the worst team in the league at generating pressure versus opposing quarterbacks. They're 32nd in adjusted sack rate with only 0.71 sacks per game. That number actually went down from last week's. I believe it was at 0.83. So that's just awful. And I would prefer if Matt Ryan is playing to play Russell Wilson, because then if he ends up playing, it'd be more back and forth, high-scoring shootout game. If Matt Ryan's out, I could see the Seahawks kind of steamrolling these guys, so that would kind of lean me probably towards playing Chris Carson more than the passing game. So right now, we're just hoping Matt Ryan plays because I think it's going to be a really big fantasy day. Because, the Seahawks defense isn't that great either. So Russell Wilson, I think, is a fantastic spend up. And if you want to pivot off of Russell Wilson, I think Deshaun Watson's another fine quarterback option this week versus Oakland. They have a 28.5 team total. I believe the Vegas total on this game is 51.5, so I believe that's second highest on the slate. It's very high, over 50 points. So points are going to be scored. And Oakland, they're going up against Oakland. Their secondary just got absolutely toasted last week by guys like MVS, Allison, Jimmy Graham, those kind of guys. And Deshaun Watson's got some better weapons here. Oakland's allowing, or actually they're 26th DVOA versus the pass. Oakland's allowing 24.6 points per game to quarterbacks this season, which is third most. That might be a little inflated from last week's Aaron Rodgers outing, but still, they do not have a good pass defense. And the Texans actually have a really good offensive line, defensive line pass blocking matchup this week, 6th best. And, Deshaun Watson does not have the best offensive line in the world, so he should have time to throw. And like I said, versus Atlanta, when he gets time to throw, he can put up huge games, and he did versus Atlanta, and I think we see the same here again. Unfortunately, he did lose his deep threat in Will Fuller, but Keke and Stills will have to step up, and I think they're going to be fine. They were fine last week. Stills had a pretty big game, over 100 yards, and Keke had that touchdown, so they should be just fine. And he's obviously got the number one wide receiver in the NFL, DeAndre Hopkins, or, at least top 3. It's a debatable argument. And Oakland's allowing over 300 passing yards per game and over 2.5 touchdowns per game, which is third most in the league. And Deshaun Watson also has rushing upside too. He can get you those rushing touchdowns and those rushing yards, which makes him pretty safe. So Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson, I don't think you can go wrong with either. If you like Chris Carson more than you like the passing game for Seattle, I think it'd make more sense to play Deshaun Watson instead of Russell Wilson, because then you can play Chris Carson, because I really want to play Chris Carson and Russell Wilson, because Chris Carson's not a huge receiving back. So if you want to play more Chris Carson, I think Deshaun Watson is your guy if you want to spend up a quarterback, and I think both are interchangeable. They should both have huge games. And then if you want to go cheap at quarterback, it's going to be Ryan Tannehill. I know a lot of guys are already talking about him. Sorry, this writing's a little bit too light here. I probably should have made it black, but hopefully you can read it. But if you don't want to spend up a quarterback, you can play Ryan Tannehill to fit in some stud running backs. But again, there's a lot of value on this slate, so I'm not saying it's a complete necessity to do it. But if you want to fit in guys like CMC and Barkley, you're probably going to have to go to Ryan Tannehill. He's only 5,100 versus Tampa, and this is just a pure matchup and price play here to fit in other guys. Tampa is 25th DVOA versus the pass this season, which is obviously bad. They're allowing 24.1 points per game to quarterbacks, which is 6th most in the league. And 318 passing yards per game, which is the most in the league. So this is a pretty good matchup for Ryan Tannehill, and he honestly was not bad last week. He completed 79% of his passes for over 300 yards and 2 touchdowns, so he got over 20 fantasy points. That's really all you can ask for at this price point. And Tampa Bay, they've been elite versus running backs. First DVOA, and they're only allowing 17 points per game and 52 rushing yards, so Derrick Henry could be in for a rough outing. So I think they're going to lean on the passing game here, and if he gets around 250 yards and 2 touchdowns, you're probably going to be pretty happy at this price point. He's going to allow you to fit in studs like Hopkins, Barkley, those kind of guys. So Ryan Tannehill, I don't mind him as a punt QB. I think he's going to have some ownership. I know a lot of guys are talking about him, and it's a pretty good point per value play. I believe he's my third in value rankings behind Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson because they just have super high projections. But after that, it's Ryan Tannehill for me. Now onto the running backs. I actually have quite a few running backs, so I think we got 5 here, but there's just a lot of good plays this slate, so I want to talk about a lot of guys. So this might be a little bit longer video, but it's football. I love talking football. So Leonard Fournette, 7,800 versus the Jets, and it's just first, let me say this. I do not have Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey on here. It's obvious. If you can afford those guys, yeah, go ahead and play them. I don't have any problem with them, although I will say CMC is very, very expensive and a very, very tough matchup versus the 49ers, so I do prefer Barkley this week. But if you can get up to Barkley, yeah, by all means, play him. I have nothing wrong with Barkley. I know he's not on here, so don't make it seem like I don't like him this week. Just like I didn't have Dalvin Cook on here last week, I still liked him. It's just I want to talk about some other guys because obviously you can play guys like Saquon Barkley every single week. So Leonard Fournette at 7,800 versus the Jets. Volume. I say it every single week, and Leonard Fournette is pretty much the volume guy. He's been one of the safer plays each week. He scored double digits in 7 out of 7 weeks so far, and he's had ceiling games into the mid to upper 20s. And I think in my last video I said he didn't score a touchdown this season. I don't know why I said that. He has a touchdown versus the Panthers, I believe, but he only has 1. And I think he's due for some positive regression. It did not happen versus Cincinnati somehow. He got stuffed on the 1-yard line, but these touchdowns are going to be coming. The Jets just actually gave up 3 rushing touchdowns to Sony Michel. So, hey, I think Leonard Fournette can do it. And he's averaging 26 touches per game, which is second in the league, only behind CMC. So the usage has been elite here, and he's nowhere near price CMC. I'm not saying he's as good as Christian McCaffrey, but I love the usage he's getting. The Jets are also giving up 29.1 points per game to running backs, which is fifth most in the league. And the Jaguars are 6-point home favorites, which is always something I always say I love in my running backs. It's great correlation to have a home favorite running back, especially, I believe, 6 point. That's pretty massive. It's not like it's a 2-point favorite. So they should get an early lead. They're going to ground and pound with Leonard Fournette. It's not like he's game script proof anyway. I really don't care if they go down much because he's going to get plenty of targets. So either way, I think he's fine, and I think he's a great play versus the Jets. And he still might not be priced as high as he should be, so might be still getting some value on here in Leonard Fournette. If someone that's got 25 plus touch potential, it's a hard sequence of words to say in a row. I like that at 7,800. And then next guy is Chris Carson. So I'm not going to be playing Russell Wilson and Chris Carson together, so I think you'd pick a side there. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do yet, but I really do like Chris Carson this week. He's only 7K versus Atlanta, and like I just said, volume. Like Fournette, he has elite usage, averaging 23.5 touches per game, which is the 4th most in the league, and is also involved in the passing game with nearly 4 targets per game. He's not as heavily involved in the passing game as guys like Le'Veon Bell, Christian McCaffrey, and Leonard Fournette, but still, it's nice to see about 4 targets a game. I believe it's actually like a 3-point something in the above 3.5, so he should be fine in that category. In the Seahawks, they have one of the highest totals on the slate and are 5.5-point favorites. They're not at home, but still I like when my running backs are favorites. And if they jump to an early lead or if Matt Ryan is out, I'm a huge Carson fan this week. And even though Atlanta's numbers versus running backs don't look as soft as you'd think they would be, it's because of how bad they are versus the pass. Teams just tend to pass on these guys, but I do expect 20-plus touches from Carson, and he should find the end zone. I mean, running backs have had fine games versus them this season. He still seems a little bit too cheap for his bell cow role, so I definitely like Chris Carson. If you want to roll with Fournette and Carson in cash games, I think that's, you're getting like 40 to 50-plus touch upside there, and I love that in cash games. And then next I want to talk about is Le'Veon Bell. He is 6,900 versus Jacksonville. And like I always say, sorry, I lost my spot. Volume. Again, we're getting a ton of volume with these guys, and they just seem a little bit too cheap. And he's averaging 22.8 touches per game, which is 7th most in the league. He dominates the snaps and is game script proof with his work in the receiving game. He owns a 20% target share, which is tied for second only behind Christian McCaffrey. I actually don't remember who he's tied in second with. I think it's Tariq Cohen, maybe. But, who cares about Tariq Cohen? So he's only behind Christian McCaffrey in target share, and he's not been efficient this season at all. His yards per carry is in the low threes, but he does draw a fantastic matchup versus Jacksonville. The Jags are 32nd DVOA versus the run, which is dead last, and they are allowing 25.1 points per game to running backs this season. Now, Christian McCaffrey did have a 50-point game versus them, so it might be a little inflated, but still, they don't have a good run defense. Le'Veon Bell actually looked good in spurts last night. He was breaking off some longer runs. So if he gets some holes to work with, he should be fine. He should be, using the passing game. I mean, last night was ugly for the Jets. It's as worst as it's going to ever get. Sam Darnold was complete trash, 5 turnovers. It's only up from here for the Jets, and he's still he had 9 DraftKings points last night versus the Patriots, which, versus the Patriots, that's not awful. So I think we get double digits here for sure. And if he gets into the end zone, please get into the end zone. I think he only has 1 touchdown this season. I think we have a 20-point-ish game out of him. And at 6,900, I will take that. And so I'm not saying you have to, but if you played Fournette, Carson, and Le'Veon Bell in cash games, you're looking at 60, maybe 70 touches. So I like that a lot. And the matchups are decent too. And then we have some value running backs as well. So if you want to spend up at the wide receiver position this week, say in GPP stacks, so say you want to get guys like Hopkins and Watson combos going, you're probably going to have to get some value running back, and we have that this week. And again, I have it in every single guy because I like volume for my running backs, but we have volume from Latavius Murray at 5,800 versus Arizona. Now, we are under the assumption Alvin Kamara is not playing. So if Kamara does play, we'll say goodbye to this play because it's going to be the Kamara show mostly. But I don't see a reason to rush him back, especially with the bye week coming up. So I assume Latavius Murray is going to be the bell cow back here. And he was a workhorse versus Chicago. He had 27 carries, 6 targets, and that's just insane volume. And if he gets to start again this week, that's a steal at this price tag at 5,800. This team is too good. And Arizona's 25th DVOA versus the run and allowing nearly 100 yards rushing per game. Saints have the second best offensive line versus defensive line run blocking matchup of the week on PFF, so holes are going to be open for them. And they are 10-point favorites at home, which means early lead, most likely, and ground and pound like last week, what Murray did last week. And if Drew Brees is back, I just trust the offense even more. So I love Latavius Murray this week. If Kamara is out, I think it's a pretty easy play for the 100. I imagine he gets into the end zone, and I love home favorite running backs, and they are massive favorites, 10-point favorites. Cardinals really shouldn't be much of a hassle for the Saints at home, so definitely like Latavius Murray. And then the next guy is Ty Johnson. So we do have clarity on this situation. Kerryon Johnson is now being placed on IR. So the new Johnson for the Lions, Ty Johnson, is going to be the starting running back. He's only 4,900 versus the Giants, and he's going to be the starter. He saw 64% of the snaps in his absence last week. Kerryon's absent, so he's the clear lead back here. And he was also involved in the passing game. He had 4 targets, so that's nice to see as well. He had, 14 touches total. I think he had 10 carries. I think he only had 29 yards, though. So that was pretty ugly, but still. This is a pretty good matchup. The Giants are allowing 28.9 points per game to running backs and over 100 rushing yards, 115 rushing yards per game, and 1 touchdown per game. You guys saw what Chase Edmonds did to them last week, and we know the Cardinals' offensive line isn't very good. But look at this matchup here. Detroit has PFF's number 1 offensive line versus defensive line run blocking matchup of the week. If Ty Johnson can get me 10 to 20 touches in this game, it's going to be hard not to hit value at 4,900, especially if he gets into the end zone. If he gets any receiving work whatsoever, that's going to be great at 4,900. So I definitely like Ty Johnson. I do think he's going to be popular, so maybe you don't have to spend up at running back in all 3 spots. So, and he's going to allow you to get in a guy like maybe something like DeAndre Hopkins. So I do like Ty Johnson a lot. It's not often we can get cheap running backs below 5K that have 15 to 20 touch upside. So I would take that in a good matchup. Now on to the receivers. DeAndre Hopkins at 8,100. I like him a lot this week. He's my number 1 spend up at the wide receiver position. 8,100 versus Oakland. Price came up a little bit, but deservedly so. He finally had that good game. And I absolutely love the Watson and Hopkins combo this week. Hopkins has a massive 29% target share, which is second in the league, only behind Michael Thomas. And Oakland just got abused by Rodgers and his clown show of a receiving core and MVS, Lazard, and Allison and Jimmy Graham. And we have a much better receiving core here, and I think the Texans can put up a huge game on offense. Oakland's 26th DVOA versus the pass. They're allowing 43 points per game to wide receivers, which is 6th most in the league. And Hopkins owns PFF's second highest wide receiver cornerback matchup of the week. And Texans lost Fuller last week, so I would assume they're going to have to lean on Hopkins more. I know Kiki and Stills exist, but still, it's going to funnel more targets to DeAndre Hopkins, hopefully some more down the field balls, because his average depth of target is not that not that high this season. So I would like some more deep targets. And he's coming in on good form. He finally had that breakout performance after his mini slump he had since week 1. He scored 28 points last week. So definitely like DeAndre Hopkins. He's my top spend up at the wide receiver position. And then if you're playing Russell Wilson, I like Tyler Lockett. 7K is a good combo here versus Atlanta. And I wanted to say right now, I like DK Metcalf as well. DK Metcalf is the deep ball guy, so kind of think like Will Fuller, whatever week that was, week 6 maybe, week 5, I don't know, something like that. But I'm not saying he's going to get 45 points, but I do think DK Metcalf's a fine play as well. But Tyler Lockett, 7K versus Atlanta. If I love Russ, I have to like his number 1 guy, Hot Lockett. It's the highest Vegas total on the slate at 53.5 over under. Atlanta is 31st DVOA versus the pass. They're allowing 43 points per game to wide receivers, which is 6th most. Nearly 200 yards to receivers and 1.4 touchdowns. These numbers are all awful. Great for Tyler Lockett, though. And this picture of Tyler Lockett is very cool, and I got to get it back. I got to get this in the picture more. All right, we're good. So where was I? Yeah, Atlanta, like I said earlier, they're the worst team in the league at generating pressure. So if Russ has time to throw, I think a deep ball for a touchdown is in order, kind of like what I said with Fuller. Now, I think DK Metcalf, he's in that same category. He's a lot cheaper. So if you want to save some salary, I think DK Metcalf is just fine. But obviously, I think Tyler Lockett's a better play just in general. And Metcalf's probably the more of the GPP guy. And this is a great matchup in the slot versus slot corner Demonte Casey. So definitely a beatable matchup. Like Tyler Lockett a lot. And then more of a mid-range guy, we have John Brown at 5,900 versus Philly. So this is a really juicy matchup versus the Eagles. They're allowing 48 points per game to wide receivers, which is most in the league, allowing nearly 200 receiving yards and 1.5 touchdowns per game to receivers as well. And this might go a little bit overlooked. I don't know how overlooked, but speed kills. And the majority of the time, he will be lined up versus Jalen Mills, who is one of the slowest corners in the NFL. He has a 4.61 40 time compared to John Brown's 4.34 speed. I think John Brown's going to cook this guy. I think a deep ball is in order here, and Mills is giving up the 4th most points per route covered this season. So I would not be surprised to get a bomb or two from John Brown. I think he's a fantastic play at 5,900. He's been very consistent this season as well. It's not like he's a boom or bust guy. He's been in the double digits in out of 5 out of 6 games this season. And when he didn't have double digits, I believe he had 9 points. So he's just right there anyway. So he's got 20-plus point upside as well. John Brown, I like him a ton this week. And then some cheaper guys, we have D.D. Westbrook at 4,500. I think he was in my first look lineup. A lot of these guys were, but I think he's just a little bit mispriced here. He seems a bit too cheap, and he's actually the leader on this team in target share, 23% of this offense, not DJ Chark, which is kind of surprising. And he's coming off a big outing where he went for over 100 yards on 9 targets versus Cincinnati. And the Jets haven't really been downright awful versus receivers this season, but they are allowing 21.1 points per game to slot receivers, which is DD's primary role, and that's below league average, which means that's a good thing for D.D. Westbrook. So I don't think D.D.'s going to have a hard time paying off his price here. He does not need to do much at 4,500, and he's got upside as well. He gets a heavy target share, so D.D. Westbrook at 4,500 makes sense to me. I think he should probably be priced in the 5K range, so 4,500, I think that's plenty of value. And then we have a duo here, so we got Kiki Cutie and Kenny Stills. I like both of them. They're both around 4K. I believe Stills is the more expensive guy. But reverses Oakland, and really it's just the same things. I'm not going to go over the matchup again. Like I just talked about with Hopkins, obviously it's a fantastic matchup. So let's talk about these two just individually. So with Fuller being out, that will open up some value here with the Texans' secondary options in Kiki and Stills. Stills played on 94% of the snaps, which is pretty much the entire game, while Kiki operated the slot and played 69% of the time. So I like both. They're going to be on the field. Stills went over for 100 yards, and Kiki had the touchdown, so they both had fine games. I already went over how bad the Raiders' pass defense is, and the Texans have one of the highest totals on the slate, so obviously all that's lining up. So if you can't get the Hopkins, I think these are both great value plays. I don't think you can go wrong with either. I think if Stills is higher owned, maybe you want to go with Kiki, GPPs. Maybe if Kiki is a little bit higher owned, you want to go with Kenny Stills. Not totally sure yet. I have not seen ownership projections yet, but I think both are fine. And also, you can play one of these guys with Hopkins too if you want to go full game stack, so I have no problem with that either. But I think they're fine value plays. I imagine one of them is going to be popular. Then onto the tight end position, I have two for you because there's only really one I'm liking. I will say I don't have Darren Waller on here, but if I want to run him back, so say you do a Texan stack, you can run him back with Darren Waller. I think that's fine. He's just very expensive. So let's talk about Austin Hooper at 5,500. He gets a great matchup versus Seattle, and this guy's been a stud this season. He has double-digit points in 6 out of 7 games, and I believe the game he didn't get double-digit points, I think he had 9. So, I mean, he's just right there, kind of like what I just said with John Brown. He's had 3 20-point outings as well, so he's got a high ceiling and a safe floor. I love that obviously. Seattle's giving up 15.5 points per game to tight ends, which is 4th most in the NFL. And he is the number 1 tight end versus safety matchup this week versus Tedrick Thompson, who is giving up 3.92 yards per route covered. And I got to say, I know we played Mark Andrews last week and he sucked, but he dropped a touchdown and he's facing Seattle. So, I mean, I'm just saying, they should have had a good game versus Seattle. And this is going to be a high-scoring game. And if you do stack Seattle, say you go with Wilson and Lockett or Metcalf, you should probably bring it back with someone. And I think Austin Hooper is the main guy here, and I like that a lot. And if Matt Ryan doesn't play, I don't think it's the end of the world for Austin Hooper, because I don't think Matt Schaub's going to be taking too many deep shots. He's probably going to look in the check down, and that's Austin Hooper's role. But I would obviously hope Ryan plays, because they've been playing great together this season, although he did catch his touchdown late in the game from Matt Schaub. But obviously Matt Ryan's a much better quarterback, and he'd have a much better opportunity if he plays. But still, I think he's fine either way. And then if you want a value tight end, which I'm really trying to play Austin Hooper this week, but if you need a value tight end, Delaney Walker at 3,600 is pretty cheap. I know he goosed you last week, but I mean, I don't think you really played him last week, so I guess it really didn't hurt you. But he's facing Tampa. I'm not in love with him, but if you need the salary relief, Walker and Tannehill might be an okay stack in GPPs, but I think they're both fine, like individual plays, maybe in cash games. It's a really good matchup. Tampa's giving up 19.4 points per game to tight ends, which is 2nd most in the NFL. And the Titans also have a shockingly high team total of 24 and a 45 over-under, and that's pretty high for the Titans. So, again, you have to get a little boost to them. And apparently they're respecting Ryan Tannehill, who did look better than Marcus Mariota. So, Delaney Walker, if you need a cheap tight end, I don't mind it. And defenses, just plug in whoever fits at the end. I really don't care. So, anyway, that's going to be it for this video, guys. If it was helpful, remember to leave a like. If it wasn't, you can leave a dislike. It only hurts my feelings for a little bit, but I'd prefer if you left a like. And if you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps me out. Really appreciate it. Follow me on Twitter at ChrisParnell16, and I'll see you guys in the next video.